We are talking draft targets on today's show. But first, help me help you and let me know what type of content you guys enjoy most throughout the offseason. Free agency buzz, draft targets, mock drafts, that kind of stuff. Or if you like both, all the above, hit the thumbs up button on today's video. Let's talk about some players we should be praying fall to Cleveland at pick 54 because the Browns have a long wait until they make their first selection. We can look at their draft stock for 2024, and they don't have a ton of ammunition in the first two days, just a round 2 and a round 3 pick as things stand. But before we start looking at any of the 5 names, you guys know me if you've watched the show before. I love history. Anytime my girlfriend goes out of town, it's World War II in color on the TV. So I thought we could look at the history of pick 54 and look who went before it. And it just goes to show how many great players sometimes come so close to pick 54 where the Browns are currently slated, right? I want to go back 2 years because it's too early to grade 2023. And I'm looking at 2 years ago, and I mean, there are some hits, but there are some misses as well. But Jaquan Brisker, Cam Jurgens, Pickens, Pierce, like those guys are all better, I would say, than Sky Moore at pick 54. We go back a season prior, okay? 2021, that features JOK going to pick 52. Wouldn't you love to have JOK if you were the Indianapolis Colts at 54? So there are some great players like Asante Samuel who went just a few selections before the 54th overall pick in the draft. How about 2020, by the way? This one was loaded. I mean, Marlon Davidson, I think, is out of the league at this point, but Darrell Taylor, really good for Seattle. Chase Claypool is not very good at all, actually. But Jalen Johnson, Trayvon Diggs, Cam Akers, Jalen Hurts, all great players that went right before the 54th pick. So here are 5 players we should be praying fall to 54. And let's begin with the Oregon wide receiver, Troy Franklin. So Franklin comes off an extremely productive season at Eugene where he put up 81 receptions for 1,300 yards. That's an average of 17 yards a pop. So we're talking big play factor and 14 touchdowns to go along with it. Those 17-yard receptions or 17 average, he hauled in 8 receptions of 40 or more yards in 2023, one of the best across the FBS. So if you are looking for a playmaker, a guy that can stretch the field, kind of bring that extra vertical element, maybe not a great slot receiver, maybe not a great receiver for 3rd and 6 to move the chains, maybe not a great red zone target for jump balls, but if you want a guy that can take a 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line all the way to the house, Troy Franklin is your guy. So when we look at Cleveland's wide receiver room, there is definitely room for improvement, right? I'm still optimistic about Cedric Tillman and even David Bell taking bigger strides into 2024, but Cleveland cannot sit on their hands when it comes to the wide receiver room. They need to load up, especially in the AFC, where I don't think a good defense can do it all for you. You've got to have some explosive offensive playmakers to take down the likes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So let me know, should the Browns draft a wide receiver first? We got to get through free agency first, and that's going to give us a better picture of Cleveland's needs going into the draft in April. But as things stand right now, should wide receiver be priority number 1 in this year's draft? Let's move on to the next guy we want to see fall to pick 54, and that is another wide receiver, this one out of Washington, Ja'Lyn Polk. Now, Ja'Lyn Polk is not the same style of receiver like Troy Franklin. He had 69 receptions, very nice for 1,100-ish yards, 9 touchdowns, and also near 17 yards a pop on his average. However, don't think Ja'Lyn Polk and Troy Franklin are cut from the same cloth. He's got a big frame, 6'2", 204 pounds, and I'm sure some more muscle can be tacked on as well. But what he makes up for in the lack of speed, and Troy Franklin's got a much quicker burst than Polk does, he has the incredible catch radius, right? He is a receiver that the ball doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's in his general vicinity, in the same zip code of Polk, he's going to find a way to beat the DB to that ball, right? He's a jump ball receiver. Remember how Franklin was a receiver on 1st and 10 that can take a catch all the way to the house? Well, Polk is a guy that on 3rd and 8, you can toss it up, lob it up to him, and he will beat the DB to the point of attack or to the highest point, and he will bring in that football. He is a red zone target. That is where Polk thrives in. So, not the same style of receiver as Franklin, who is a much more vertical, big playmaker type of receiver, but Polk, sure hands, reliable guy. I wouldn't say like similar to Amari Cooper, but not too far off from Amari Cooper. So before we get on to the rest of the Browns draft targets, help us reach our March 1st goal, which we are inching towards. And I don't want to be inching towards. I want to sprint to it. We are at 33,363 subscribers, and I want to get to 500 before March 1. So help us accomplish that goal, and in return, get yourself the best free Browns content out there. Moving on to our next draft target, this time on defense, we're going to go with Jer'Zhan Newton. Now would be a good time to say there is some praying with this one heavily involved. I think there's a okay chance that Franklin and Polk could be there at 54. Newton, I've heard, could go as early as round 1. Now, when we look at the top defensive tackles in this year's draft class, I'd be okay with pretty much all the first 4 guys. Newton, Sweat, Murphy. Murphy's number 1, but I don't think Byron Murphy gets out of round 1. Newton, I think, has a chance of slipping out of round 1. Sweat, I think, is going to go round 2. And Jenkins and Taylor are closer to round 2, round 3 candidates. But Jer'Zhan Newton, this one's going to take a lot of praying because I think he's going to be very hard to find outside of the first round of the draft. But this happens every single year, where all we do is consume mock drafts for months, and we get an idea of who's going in the first round because we keep seeing their name in it. And then we see guys like Joey Porter Jr. and Keely Ringo that we were told were round 1 picks for a long time, and they weren't. So same thing can happen with Jer'Zhan Newton, hopefully. When we look at the Browns' defensive line, obviously there is a void next to Dalvin Tomlinson because Jordan Elliott, Shelby Harris, and Maurice Hurst are all free agents, and I'm not quite confident that Siaki Ika is ready to step into a starting role after seeing very little of him in his rookie season. So, the 6'2", 295-pound defensive tackle is a prototypical mold of what Andrew Berry looks for in his interior defensive lineman. He doesn't have a long history of drafting the 300-pound-plus sea monsters, right? He wants the defensive tackles that have a little bit of speed, have some agility to their game. And for a guy like Newton, who combined for 103 pressures from 2022 to 2023, which was the most by any interior defensive lineman, that is a DT that offers some athletic upside and some pass rushing abilities, which we have seen Berry pursue in previous drafts. Moving on to our next draft target, let's talk about the Texas A&M linebacker, Edan Cooper. Now, Cooper was a do-it-all player for the Aggies last season. He led the team in tackles with 83, led them in tackles for loss with 17, led them in sacks with 8, led them in forced fumbles with 2. He was a one-man army in Aggie Town last season, and he was phenomenal. He's 6'2", 227 pounds, and I think the slight, tiny little undersized frame may be the thing that's keeping him out of round 1, along with the fact that off-ball linebackers are just not valued like they used to be. But he makes up for that lighter frame with exceptional speed and fluidity. I'm a little bit old-fashioned when it comes to NFL defenses, and I love a good middle linebacker. I feel like a great middle linebacker is just contagious for the rest of the defense, right? They're right in the middle of the action. They're involved in the pass rush. They're involved in coverage, and the Browns need to find a long-term answer at middle linebacker, and I'm not quite sure that it is Anthony Walker. When Walker's been on the field for the Browns, he looks like a guy that I'd love to see play the green dot spot for Cleveland for the next 5, 6, 7 years. But when he's not out there, he is sorely missed. And so you might say, well, the Browns need to bring Anthony Walker back, right? They are so much better with him than without him. But if you can't trust Walker to play a full season, aren't you signing yourself up for heartbreak when, just like the previous few seasons in Cleveland, he inevitably misses time? Hopefully that's not the case in 2024, but we have to acknowledge the fact that Walker has been unavailable for far too many games during his time in Cleveland. And that's not his fault. That's just, unfortunately, unlucky injury breaks. And I don't think the Browns should count on Walker coming back in 2024 to play a full season. It is time to draft a legit linebacker. They haven't really drafted a serious linebacker since JOK, which it's turned out great as he heads towards the end of his rookie contract, but they need to give JOK a running mate. I'm not really on board with the constant one-year contracts at linebacker. Let's get a middle of the defense for the next 5, 6, 7 years like Edan Cooper, who was the heart and soul of a really good Texas A&M defense, by the way. It was just the offense and Jimbo Fisher that dragged them down in College Station. So picking a linebacker for me. Would you rather re-sign Anthony Walker? Don't get me wrong. This is not a Walker slander piece. This is just simply an honest conversation that if you can't count on Walker to play at least close to 17 games a season, should you really expect him to in 2024 and just run it back? Or should you take a swing at the draft and try and find a long-term piece in round number 2 with Cooper? Moving on to our 5th and final draft target, Blake Corum from the team up north, the running back who powered the Michigan offense all the way to a national championship for now, until the asterisk comes in. So, let's talk about Blake Corum for a moment. One, I'm not sure if the Browns will draft a running back because I'm assuming by April they will have a much better idea as to how Nick Chubb's rehab is going. But if they get to April and they kind of catch wind of, listen, Chubb doesn't look like he's going to be ready for the first half of the season, which that should not be a surprise to anyone. I would prefer for the Browns to at least have the option to take the number 1 running back. I think Blake Corum will be there at 54, and I don't think you have to pray very hard for him to be available at pick 54, but I don't want to see him go before 54 because I want the Browns to at least have the option to take the number 1 running back if they so choose, because they don't think Nick Chubb is going to be close to healthy for much of the 2024 season. So, insert a guy who had 28 total touchdowns last year, 27 on the ground, averaged nearly 5 yards a carry, longtime player at Ann Arbor, and there are some concerns about whether or not his tires have too much wear and tear before he even gets to the NFL. Now, he's 5'8", 213 pounds, so definitely a bit on the smaller side, but he underwent meniscus surgery back in December of 2022. He played the entire 2023 season. He returned because he knew that surgery would knock him out for all of the pre-draft workouts and whatnot before last year, so he opted to come back to Michigan for another season, and he played very well, 27 touchdowns and FBS best on the ground. But drafting a running back coming off knee surgery not long ago doesn't sound like a wonderful idea, but Nick Chubb also underwent major knee surgery in college, and he bounced back pretty well. So I'm not going to let that Blake Corum knee surgery completely allow me to eliminate him from my draft board. So again, I don't think Blake Corum is in the same category as the first 4 guys of hopefully he's still there at 54. I think he'll be there at 54, but I would like for him to definitely be there at 54. So if the Browns choose to pick a running back, they can choose to pick the best one available. Okay, let's wrap up today's show by picking a card. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our style of video today. We've got Mr. Cullen Brown on the 1s and 2s. Cullen, which card do you want to go with?
Okay, we talked a lot about the second round today.
Yeah, we did.
Blake Corum's numbers also too. We're all fans of Blake Corum here at the Chat Sports.
Cullen says that with a gun to his head as our boss, a big Michigan football fan.
So I'm going to go with 2, and I haven't picked clubs in a while, so I'm going to go 2 of clubs.
2 of clubs? All right, I like it. I'm going to go with 9 of hearts, 54, 5 plus 4, right? 9 of hearts. 6 of clubs. 6 of clubs. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to sign off and see you all later.